Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up from August 30th through September 5th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 8 shows, I watched 1 movie, I listened to 1 podcast, and I listened to 2 books. I did that all on the first go, even though it looked like I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, that's the fun thing about filming here. Seaplanes. They just happen. If you don't recognize this background, that's because I'm at my best friend's house. I'm pet sitting while she's away for the weekend, so let's just get into what I read, watched, and listened to before the pets both want to come knock over this tripod. First this week I finished Space Struck. This is a poetry anthology that I got in my Life's Library subscription. I'm not really big on poetry, but when it's presented to me, I will try it. There were some really good lines in this, but again, I'm not big into poetry, so it didn't really stick with me. The other physical book I read this week was Perfectly Preventable Deaths. This is by Deirdre Sullivan, and this takes place in Ireland, and this was my first read for the Demonathon, which is just so much fun so far. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you might not know that I've decided to have triple October, which means that September, October, and November, I'm just gonna treat all of it like October, and I'm having a really fun time, except for when I go outside and it's still summer and I'm confused for a moment. However, this book has the perfect atmosphere for triple October. It's about these twins whose mother remarries to this guy who owns this castle in County Galway, so they move there from Cork, and the town itself is really weird. It's very small, everybody's kind of standoffish. There's this old woman that lives somewhere in the castle and they don't really know how she's related to Brian, their stepdad, but she is. This is the type of book that you definitely read for the atmosphere. There are lots of things that go down in the plot and realizations of the characters, such as our main character realizes that she's queer at some point. But really I was just very drawn into this very autumnal, kind of creepy, kind of spooky setting. Someone actually sent me this book from my Amazon wishlist, but they didn't include their name when they sent it to me, so if it was you, please let me know so I can thank you, because I absolutely loved this book. On to the very long list of shows I watched this week. First, we watched a couple of episodes of Scandal. It seems that we can only watch a couple at a time because it's a very intense show, and you just get to the point where you want something light and fluffy, which is when we moved into watching seasons 4 and 5 of Parks and Recreation, because it's light, it's fluffy, it makes us laugh, it's so fun to revisit. This is a rewatch. After that, while I had the living room to myself for a little while, I watched the first 2 episodes of the 2nd season of Pose. I watched the whole first season very, very quickly. Basically a year ago, because I downloaded it while I was in America and then watched it while I was in Canada from Netflix. I wasn't downloading it illegally, and I finally was able to find the 2nd season, so now I am watching that and I'm very much enjoying it. As much as one can enjoy a show set during the AIDS epidemic. Another intense show that we can only watch a couple of at a time is Ozark. We finished the 2nd season, we're into the 3rd season, which means that soon we're going to have to find a new show. Probably one that doesn't give us as many heart palpitations. I will say, however, that I am really enjoying seeing the character growth in Ruth in particular. There are lots of different characters that have these moments that I really like, but I seem to keep coming back to how much I enjoy that character. Again, to flip back to something light, my roommate showed me the first 3 episodes of News Radio, which is from 1995, and it is funny. It's interesting to see so many people that I have heard of or seen in other things, or really mostly know their voices in the case of Phil Hartman. It was also really fun to see Candy Alexander, who is also on Scandal. This week was also the finale of Canada's Drag Race, so I finally got to see who was crowned, and it was well deserved. I think this is the first season ever where I wouldn't have minded if any of the queens win. Usually I have kind of a top 2 out of the 3 going into it, and then somebody that I'm like, well, if they win, then I will be upset, but that was not the case this season. Since I'm pet sitting for my best friend, I came over a few hours early before she left and we watched some more episodes of The Crown. We're watching this very slowly because I'm basically never here because firstly, she's in college, and then secondly, pandemic. So we've been working on this show for quite a while, but we finally got into the 3rd season, which is when they changed the cast. And I don't like it so far. I know I'm eventually going to get used to the fact that all of the cast is different people, but it's really annoying, mostly because I'm still just in the 1st episode. Don't get me wrong, I know I'm gonna love seeing Helena Bonham Carter play Margaret. It's going to be wonderful. And also the woman that's playing the Queen, I know from Grace Point and I loved her in that, so I am going to get over it, but it's gonna take some time. And then just before going to sleep last night, we watched 2 episodes of The Great Canadian Baking Show because we just needed some wholesome content. It was lovely. On the previous episode I had watched, they had Canada Week. The first episode we watched this time was British Week, which is funny because one of the contestants Essence was born in the UK, so he figured if he went home this week it was going to be a travesty. And then the next episode was the holiday baking episode, and they were both just very fun. We're going into the semi-finals. It's just so wholesome and lovely. The movie we watched this week, however, is not wholesome, but it is very funny and a star-studded cast, and that's Knives Out. This is a murder mystery that has a decent helping of twists, and I really don't want to say more than that. Even when you think you know the whole story, you don't necessarily know the whole story. This one was a lot of fun, and I'm just going to leave it at that. The podcast I listened to this week was the most recent episode of the Anthropocene Reviewed. This was actually talking about the podcast itself, and that's partly because there will be a book coming out next year based on the essays of this podcast. If you're not familiar with this podcast, it is hosted by John Green, and he basically rates elements of human existence. Whether that's Diet Dr. Pepper or Canadian geese or cholera, there are many different topics throughout the podcast. This was a very personal episode because it was basically a history as to why he started this podcast in the first place, and I really enjoyed his candor and how open he was. On to the books I listened to this week, the first one being White Fragility. This is another anti-racism book. I feel like if you're reading up on a subject, you should read more than one book because even though there will be overlap, you are also going to learn more things. In the interest of not triggering my viewers of color, I'm not going to go into the specific things I learned in this book. I am just going to say that this is a very important text, and if you are looking for a book on this subject, I highly suggest this one. For the Octavia E. Butler slow read along, I listened to Kindred, and oh my goodness, the narrator did a fantastic job. Although I had never read this book before, I did read the graphic novel a couple of years ago, so I was familiar with the premise of this book, which is this character named Dana from 1976 who suddenly goes back in time to this little boy who's drowning in a river, and she realizes through some detective work that this is one of her ancestors, and every time he's in trouble, he basically calls her to him, and she saves his life. Unfortunately for her, this means that every time she is pulled back in time, she is in the era where people were enslaved, and she is treated extremely poorly. This is a very, very brutal book. But one of the things I loved about it is her husband is white, and there is a section where he is also brought back in time and sees more clearly what people of her race have gone through. Through this lens, we get a lot of commentary on how little white people understand the history of slavery, and the type of people that go, slavery is over, why can't you get over it, are just nonsense, obviously. I've been meaning to read this author's works for years, so I'm very excited that this slow read along is happening because it means that by 2022 I will have read all of her books. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you are here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I recently set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. You can find that link down below, as well as the link to my PayPal or my Amazon wishlist, in case you would like to send me a book. And if you do, try to include your name so I can thank you properly. You can like and share this video as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!